It's time for the Onyx News. Extraterrestrials, time anomalies, dimensions, remote viewing, UFOs, UAPs, and USOs, ghostly encounters, abductions, Bigfoot, and more. Your end of the week news source for everything unexplained. Here is your host for the Onyx News Podcast, Margie K.
Hello and welcome to Onyx News. I'm your host, Margie K, and tonight we have a good show for you. My guest tonight is Will Blesch, and he will be with us shortly. Before we get into that, I do want to mention that the UFO Audit Conference that you've heard about is now available for free viewing. And if you go to our YouTube channel, just go to onyxnetwork.com. You will see a link to that, and you can watch the entire conference at no charge. And we have one of our conferences this year. We've got several more coming up, but the Oz Cryptid Fest will be in Kansas City, September the 12th of this year. So mark your calendar for that and watch the conference page on the Onyx Network. And now for some weird news.
Now it's time for Weird News.
We've got a few very strange stories for you tonight. First one is about a founding father's frisky ghost that has been spotted all over Philadelphia. Benjamin Franklin was 84 when he died on April 17, 1790, and his legacy has continued on for hundreds of years since. So too, supposedly, has his spirit, and not in a metaphorical sense in this context. The Big Book of Pennsylvania Ghost Stories from 2008 describes Benjamin Franklin as a rather active spirit. A cleaning woman employed at the American Philosophical Society claims that she often saw the founding father's spirit hurrying down its halls. The society was founded by Franklin in 1743 and happens to be right around the corner from Carpenter's Hall, the setting of the First Continental Congress, and also supposedly a haunted site. Almost every morning, she would see a man dressed in 17th century clothing wandering through the library, whispering to himself. Reads Haunted Philadelphia, Famous Phantoms, Sinister Sights, and Lingering Legends to 2015. He would move books around, even climbing ladders to reach them. Other times, he paced back and forth or leaned over a table to study. Things were generally copacetic between Ben and the cleaning woman. Then one day in 1884, the woman claims Franklin's ghost pushed her out of the way to get where he was going. The woman, upset the ghost didn't stop to apologize, chased after him. The book reads, when she caught up to him, she lectured him on how a gentleman should behave. Somehow that sounds like Franklin. This somehow worked. Franklin's spirit, properly chastised, folded his arms and bowed an apology to her. He even went so far as to avoid any rooms she was cleaning until she was done, proving you'd never too old or too dead to learn some manners. Not that it stuck. Haunted Philadelphia mentions women have been reported getting pinched by unseen fingers in the building. And that also sounds like Franklin. Franklin's ghost, the Big Book goes on, has also been caught outside of the building on occasion, hurrying along to an appointment that's definitely been on the calendar for a while. He's even been seen dancing a jig. The American Philosophical Society doesn't respond to Paranormal PA's request for comment on Ben's ghost supposedly dancing his way through the halls and down the street. Maybe we'll get Paranormal PA on here sometime soon. And then from Fox 31 Morning News in Denver, they say a notoriously haunted mansion with reports of flickering chandeliers, books flying off shelves, and several resident ghosts is available for lease in Denver. The Peabody Whitehead Mansion sits on Grant Street and is usually just a stop during Denver ghost tours. However, on Halloween of 2013, the current owner, Ira Wurtentail, and his wife, Cindy Powers, bought the house and refurbished it over more than a decade. Now it is available for lease. The mansion was first built in 1889 and designed by architect Frank E. Edbroke, who also designed the Brown Palace. For over a century, the mansion's website said it served as a boarding house, nightclub, restaurants, and clerical offices. Now it has 8 apartments with anything from artifacts in the common spaces to collections of historic artwork. A spokesperson for the mansion, Alan Blado, said the renovations took over 10 years, but there's still some of its original charm, like the old staircase. Underneath the stairs also lies a collection of artifacts that Wurtentail has collected around the world, including authentic time period prosthetics. Around every corner, there's either a unique painting, a vintage vase, or even toy babies hiding in a crawl space. As he started doing this, probably around 2009, he developed this style and was kind of working on his craft. And this property is kind of like the culmination of all those efforts, where he's refined his style and how they do things. And it's really just all come together. The apartments vary in price from $3,300 to $3,800 a month. One apartment is already rented out and the others are available, but these won't be the only residents in the building. The first residents were Dr. William Whitehead, a war surgeon, and his family. The second resident was James Peabody, the 13th and 15th governor of Colorado, according to the mansion. These 2 men were said to have brought spirits to the house from the people Whitehead couldn't save or the lives taken from Peabody's policies and actions. The mansion said White House reported recurring nightmares, and his family apparently witnessed books flying off the shelves and pictures falling from the frames at night. The mansion is also said to have hosted at least 12 spirits over the years, including Whitehead, who died in the house. Other ghosts include Eloise or Ella, who lives on the 2nd floor and is said to be commonly seen appearing in mirrors or staring out the windows. The mansion said another woman who reportedly died in the house is said to haunt the basement of the mansion, while another woman is said to be buried under the foundation. This woman's story was investigated in season 6 of Ghost Hunters. 2 ghosts are children, and one is said to mess with the 2nd floor chandelier. Another is an old man who is known to haunt the 3rd floor and is the suspected cause for glasses and beer bottles at the bar to spill without being touched. Another old man haunts the 1st floor and is reported to have a strong smell of a cherry-scented pipe. Blado said that through his and Wurtentail's time in the mansion, they haven't seen any ghosts, but they have brought in several paranormal investigators who have heard footsteps and voices. A former employee from the previous tenant had told Blado a time when a computer turned on and typed the same letter over and over again. If you can live with these ghost stories and look past a creak of a floorboard or flickering lights, several units are available for rent. And from WION, for one Artemis II astronaut, a 9-year-old prophecy has come true. And this is a piece by Anamika Singh, published April 9th. Artemis II astronaut Reed Wiseman was already working with NASA when he received a fortune cookie in 2017 that talked about visiting a strange place that would offer a new perspective. As he flew to the moon, this fortune has come true for him. Artemis II astronaut said that before. And the same year, Wiseman captioned the post, "I chose to believe this fortune I received tonight. Perhaps the moon or a journey to Mars." Little did he know that this fortune would come true. NASA shared Wiseman's photo from 2017 with the caption, "Strange place check, new perspective triple check." The strange place is the moon. While flying into space and looking back on Earth gave the astronauts a new perspective on life, often known as the overview effect. Weissman's trip to the moon marks the first time humans have left orbit in over 50 years. By the way, splashdown will occur in about 2 hours from now, so be sure to watch that. And we are going to put that up on our Facebook page, um, our group pages. And then in other weird news, this is from Outdoors. A small human skull wasn't an intentional part of an Easter egg hunt this past Sunday at a community park in Long Beach, California, but it definitely derailed the happy event. Families reported discovering the partially buried skull while kids were hunting for plastic eggs along a nature trail in the park. Local KTLA 5 News says authorities have confirmed that the skull is real and from a human. However, additional details are currently unavailable. That's got to be a first. Easter egg hunting and finding a skull. Then from Yahoo Life, Banshee screams in chilling handprints in one of UK's most haunted woods. It has long been rumored that a woodland in Somerset is one of the most haunted spots in the UK. From banshee-like screams heard by campers to drivers discovering chilling handprints inside their cars, locals believe they have experienced numerous encounters with a notorious ghost known as Sally. Many of these spooky incidents have been connected to Browns Folly Nature Reserve near Bathford and a nearby road called Sally in the Wood. Only in England do they have names like this for their roads. So, what do people say happened in the woodland? The unusual stories are being explored in a BBC sound series produced by BBC Radio Somerset called The Other Side. Stories surrounding a ghostly woman reportedly seen by people have been connected to a car accident and a murder, none of which have been proven. There was, in fact, a real person named Sally or Sarah Gibson who lived in the area in the 1700s. According to research by the Bathford Society, local records show Gibson had lived in a cabin in the woods until she passed away 2 months short of her 100th birthday. One man who believes he may have encountered the local ghost is an account manager, Jamie Vaughn. In his teens, he would often sit in his car with his friends in the Browns Folly Nature Reserve car park. After a night of driving, they would sometimes hear knocking in the metalwork, which he put down to the vehicle's cooling down. I tried to be skeptical about it, he said. One night, we were sitting wing mirror to wing mirror, and the knocking started getting louder. It was underneath me in the driver's seat. When he turned on his lights, he saw a muddy handprint on his front window. I reversed out of there like a bat out of hell. I tried to clean off the handprint, but it wouldn't come off because it was on the inside of my window. My windows were up. I can't explain any of it. I've never had the courage to talk about it until now. It's been almost 14 years since the incident, Vaughn added. She was in the middle of the road. Another local retired officer, Philippa Cole, also believes the ghost could have been seen doing an unusual call-out. On a night shift in the late 90s, Cole attended a road traffic incident on the road Sally in the Wood. The first thing the driver, said to me was, "Is the lady okay?" At that time, we didn't know anyone else was involved, she said. He said she was in the middle of the road. He had swerved to avoid her, and she had a white coat on and didn't move. I remembered he also said he had heard a woman scream afterwards. Our fear was he'd struck her. She immediately searched the area for the woman he described and said there was absolutely no trace of anyone, and put it down to the famous ghost of Sally in the Woods. It was spooky. I had heard the tale from other officers that accidents have occurred because the lady from Sally in the Woods. I use that road quite a lot, and it makes me think about it all the time, especially when I'm driving through it at night, she added. Youth group leader Shay Stew recounted a camping trip in Browns Folly where he looked back and saw a pinprick light moving towards them. It was the dead of night. We were trying to go in single file, he said. We all looked back at the light. It got closer to us, and we literally heard the most horrific scream, like a banshee scream. It went through your bones. Everybody had a massive freak out. He described the noise as a human scream that felt like a warning to get out. There's a strange feeling here. You've almost got that white noise that just covers the wood. This wood is incredibly haunted, he added. And also, chairman of the Bathford Society, Peter Martin, has heavily researched the topic, but admitted he's never seen the ghost in question. Sally was a real person, he said. She was born in 1724 at Monkton Farley, Wiltshire, and was one of 5 children. Her husband, John Gibson, had a certificate that allowed him to hunt game. When he died, she was asked to leave the gamekeeper's cottage, and she went to live in a hut nearby. The dwelling was located southeast from Brown's Folly in Worley. He went on to explain how records show she hung mugs outside of her home in which people deposited coins. She lived until she was around 100, which is extraordinary, Martin said. He said a sepulchral scream in the area was often reported. It was commonplace, and people would say, "Oh, that's just Sally." She was always thought of in good terms, never as an evil person, he said. So that is it for our weird news this evening. And believe me, there is a lot out there because I've got my assistant Violet researching these things. And thank you, Violet, for finding some good ones for us. We are going to take a short break. Come back. We're talking with Will Blesch. Patriarch's oxygen water addresses a condition called hypoxia, which is insufficient oxygen in the cells and tissues. The fact is that hypoxia triggers 90% of all chronic conditions, including circulation issues, low oxygen levels in the blood, and more. By drinking Patriarch's oxygen water, you can restore oxygen levels in the body, restore energy, reduce age spots, and renew stem cells. Now, as an UNX listener, you can get 10% off of Patriarch's ultra-high oxygen content water at patriarchs.us/discount/UNX News, or check the shop page at UNX Network for more information.
The paranormal field is changing, and now, more than ever, it's time for professionals to lead the way. Join the Oz Professional Paranormal Investigators Association, a global network of serious investigators dedicated to raising the standard of real paranormal research. Access professional certifications, advanced training, and courses exploring true investigation, psychic phenomena. If you're a real paranormal investigator, be a part of the group defining the future. Join today. Visit ozinstitute.org. That's ozinstitute.org. The new book, How to Research a Haunted House by paranormal investigator Margie Kay and professional researcher Violet Wisdom, is now available from UNX Media. This one-of-a-kind book explains how to do research on a house with uncommon methods and resources used by historic home researchers, and how to determine who may be doing the haunting and why. How to research a haunted house can be used by homeowners, renters, investors, and it should be in the library of all professional paranormal investigators. Get this unique book at unxmedia.com or amazon.com. That's unxmedia.com or amazon.com.
Welcome back. I'm Margie Kay, and this is UNX News. My guest this evening is Will Blesch. Will is a seasoned researcher, marketer, entrepreneur, and dual American-Israeli citizen with an unrelenting passion for uncovering history's most enigmatic truths. Deeply immersed in both the political and theological landscapes of one of the world's most ancient and sacred regions, he brings a rare lived perspective to the questions that sit at the intersection of belief, power, and human origins. Alongside his professional work, runs a deep, lifelong fascination with the mythic, the colossal, and the unseen forces that shape human history. A devoted lover of science fiction and fantasy, Will draws inspiration from writers such as Ray Bradbury, Isaac Asimov, C.S. Lewis, and J.R.R. Tolkien. Welcome to the program, Will.
Thank you so much for having me, Margie.
Well, thank you so much for joining me this evening. We are going to be discussing tonight, among other things, your latest book, In the Shadow of Goliath. Angels, Giants, UFOs, and the Hidden History of the Watchers, Nephilim, and Interdimensional War. This sounds absolutely fascinating, but let's go back a little bit. How did you get interested in these subjects?
Well, it's kind of a long story, but my honestly is because my mom was is a gigantic Star Trek freak. And when I was a kid, like in the early 80s, that's when like Empire Strikes Back came out and all George Lucas was really doing his thing. But my mom had a friend who had videotaped or like he recorded the reruns of the original Star Trek. Like he recorded every single episode for all 3 seasons. And he gave them to my mom, and then she sat me down and we did this gigantic marathon of every single Star Trek episode ever made. And I fell in love with the whole idea of beings outside of our world, right? And I wanted that. I wanted there to be something more than just the commonplace, what I considered boring human, life as a kid.
Right.
And so that's kind of like what started it. And then I have always been a voracious reader. And so my mom was like, well, you could start off with some of the early classics, Jules Verne and Ray Bradbury and Isaac Asimov and H.G. Wells and this kind of thing. And so I just started reading, and I kept on and just kept on and kept on. So that's kind of like what sparked it. But then what really like became an actual real thing for me was the fact that my family and I were living in Virginia, in Buckingham County, way out in the woods. My mom is a neonatal intensive care nurse, or she was at the time, and we basically moved wherever she got a much better job. She was a single parent, and every time she got a better job with a higher pay, we would move there. Well, this was the latest place that we moved. And one evening it was myself, my sisters, and my cousins actually had come with us. And we were out playing around, I don't know, like 6:30 in the evening, something like that, when the sun is going down. Photographers would call it magic hour, that kind of thing. And if you know anything about the landscape in Virginia, there's just tons and tons of forest. There's like a lot of woods, right? And in the place where we were living, like I said, we were living out in the countryside, and there was a forest or a tree line way off in the distance. And we had like this gigantic field that was cleared of any kind of trees. And, there's like wild onions and stuff growing out in this field. And we would go along picking it and, crunching on them. But there's this tree line way out there. And on the opposite side of the house, there's another tree line. Well, we're out there, we're playing, and I can't remember what we were playing, but as we're out there, across the top of the front tree line, I guess I could say, there were these 3 lights. And at first I was like, oh, that's like, maybe some Air Force jets or something, something with running lights. That's what I thought at first. because this wasn't like at the treetop level. It was more, I don't know, like at the cumulus cloud level. It was pretty high up in the sky, but it was over that tree line. And I saw it, and there were these 3 crimson lights. And I glanced up, saw those, and just went back to playing. But the next time I looked up, those things were coming towards us, and they were moving pretty fast. But it was like kind of like a cruising kind of speed, I guess. But there was like zero noise. It didn't sound like jets. It didn't sound like anything.
Yeah,
That's kind of weird. And they're just like moving. And as they got closer and closer overhead, I noticed that they were in a triangle shape, and each light was at the point of a triangle. And I was like, that is so cool. And then I was like, I had to stop doing what I was doing and just pay attention to that. As it went overhead, I noticed, oh my gosh, these aren't just like glowing orbs. You know, there's actually this black triangle that's connecting all of these 3 crimson lights. And then it goes over, it hits the other tree line, and it just stops for just like a couple seconds. And then it just shot straight up, and it moved so fast that, like, you know, it was there, and then it's gone. And I was just like,
you knew that wasn't one of ours.
Yeah, I was like, that is so awesome. So me and my sisters and my cousins, they saw it too. It wasn't just me. And we went running in to tell my mom and her sister and her husband. And they didn't believe us. They were like, you kids are, just kids, or, we know you've been watching too much Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
It was so frustrating to me at the time that no one believed us. And we kind of just went on and, moved past that incident. And I have never actually seen anything like that ever again. I've never had any other experience or anything like that. But it was something that stuck with me. It's never gone away. And it's something that, beyond my interest in, science fiction, it was like, oh, there's something that was real that kind of, I wouldn't say like shattered or fractured my reality or anything like that. It's a little hyperbolic, but
just changed your perspective.
Yes, it did. It actually, it entered into my frame of reference in a way that I was like, there is something more, right? And at the time as a kid, I was just like, this is, I know what it is. It's an alien UFO, right? Because I'd seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind by this point, and I'd seen E.T. So this was, that's all I could think of. Over time, my perspective has changed a little bit on that. But that is actually what got me started on a research sort of journey, something where I was like, everything that we've been told cannot be the God's own truth. This cannot be all there is. And so if there is truth, I want to find out what that is. And so that's basically one of the big things that got me started.
How many books have you written?
This is actually my first traditionally published book.
Okay. Well, it looks quite impressive. I can't wait to read it. I did peruse it a bit. So besides that one encounter that, let's say it's a UFO, have you ever had any sort of paranormal experiences, ghosts, poltergeists, missing time, anything like that?
I can't say that I have, not that I'm aware of. There's definitely been, you know what? There were actually in the same time frame when I was about 12 years old, which was when I had that experience with the UAP or whatever. I was also super interested in fairies. Okay. And I was I had read this really, really old poem, and it was about the fairy queen. And I can't remember who wrote it, but it was from several hundred years ago. And I had found this book of poems about fairies at the school library. And I had read all of this stuff, and in the poem, it gives like this magical formula for how to enter into the world of fairies. And so and it had to do with you wait until Midsummer's Eve. And so I calculated all the stuff, what day it's supposed to be on and everything. And you're supposed to go out at around midnight to a place in the forest where there's like a hill, and there's a cleared area with it, like a circle, right? And there's like this little hill inside this circle of trees. And on this hill, if you see these rings of mushrooms, then you know that this is a fairy hill. And there's times when, a door will open up from the world of Fae into the world of men from somewhere on this hill. And the way that you can find it as a mortal human is that you go around this hill at midnight on Midsummer's Eve when there's like this full moon, and you go counterclockwise, and you go a certain number of times. And I can't remember exactly how many times it is now, but you go around it. And then at the, once you've reached the number, the prescribed number, whatever, you hold out your arm and you fall straight against the hillside. And when you do, your arm will smack up against the door into the world of Fae. The door will open and you'll have the opportunity to go in.
Wow,
so
that's very detailed instructions.
It was actually all in this poem. And so I was like, I'm gonna try it. And so I woke my older sister, or she's actually younger than me, but she's like the middle child. I woke her up, and I woke my oldest cousin up, and I was like, you guys got to come with me. So we got flashlights. We snuck out of the house. We went into the woods where I had been searching like all summer long for something that kind of matched this description. So we go out there, and I did this thing, but I got freaked out before I could like complete the ritual or whatever. And I was like, suddenly, like, there was a overwhelming sense of fear that came over me, and I could not, I was just like, we got to go home right now. And my sister and my cousin were like, what's wrong? I was like, I can't do this. Let's go. And so we turned around and we went, and as we were going, there was something in a tree. And to this day, I don't know what it was, but it dropped down behind us while we were walking along. And it was like this shadow kind of thing. It was just like this, and it was kind of like a person, but it was black as black. And it was like, run. And we just ran.
Wow.
And so that was, if there was any kind of paranormal whatever, I would say that was it. I have no idea what it was, but I know I was like, at that point, I was kind of scared out of my mind. And it was like, we ran all the way home. Wow. And we did not tell my parents anything about that particular incident, because first of all, we would have gotten in trouble for sneaking out of the house. But
right.
Second of all, it was another one of those things where no one's going to believe you. So it was,
wow.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like, kind of like, when somebody's watching you and you turn around and someone's watching you. Sounds like you picked up, you felt like there was something there. Now, I'm a remote viewer. As you're telling this story, I was a remote viewer. Do you want me to tell you what I saw standing behind you?
Sure.
All right. It is all black. And I see it has wings. It has long wings. but it didn't really use the wings. It just kind of jumped down, and it was man-sized. It was tall, like 6 feet tall.
Interesting.
And that sounds like Mothman.
Okay.
I've been dealing with Mothman reports in Kansas City, but it goes back to Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Goes back to that area, and it's also been tons of sightings in Chicago as well. And my theory is that they're following the river. So anyway, that's what I see. That's just
all right.
Wild. And what is it about that neck of the woods? What is it about Virginia? My brother recently moved there, and he's having all kinds of weird stuff happen on his property. He's seeing these weird lights come out of the woods at night. There'll be 1 or 2 or 3 of them at a time, little tiny green lights that will dance around, come out in their yard, and go back in the woods. Do you have any ideas, thoughts about that?
I don't know. I mean, there have been, I actually just got done reading a book, the book Imminent by Lou Elizondo. I don't know if you've read that or not. But in that book, he talks about some experiences people have had with various sizes and types of orbs. That I don't know if this is what you're talking about when you talk about these lights that have come out of the woods and that people.
Yeah, I mean, well, they are balls of light.
So, in what he was talking about in his book is these UAPs, maybe that are. I don't know if they're like scouts, or what exactly their function might be, but they come in various sizes and colors, and the only ones that he's found that were, biologically or that had some kind of physiologically damaging effect on the humans who witnessed them or came in contact with them were a blue color. So if these were green, maybe they're totally fine and safe and whatever, but I have not experienced that. So I can't say like what I definitely can't give a definitive answer on that.
Yeah. My brother said he just had the feeling they were fairies.
Okay. All right.
And, sometimes you get a feeling, kind of a spidey sense about something, whether it's good or bad. In this case, he felt like they were good, but there's a lot going on in Virginia. Let's put it that way. There's just a lot. I get reports of all types of things from that area. And Mothman notwithstanding, that's quite interesting. We are going to take a short break. When we come back, I'm going to play the trailer that you sent me.
Okay.
So that'll be an introduction to your book, and then we'll kind of take it from there. We'll be back right after these messages. Patriarch's oxygen water addresses a condition called hypoxia, which is insufficient oxygen in the cells and tissues. The fact is that hypoxia triggers 90% of all chronic conditions, including circulation issues, low oxygen levels in the blood, and more. By drinking Patriarch's oxygen water, you can restore oxygen levels in the body, restore energy, reduce age spots, and renew stem cells. Now, as an UNX listener, you can get 10% off of Patriarch's ultra-high oxygen content water at patriarchs.us/discount/UNX News, or check the shop page at UNX Network for more information.
The paranormal field is changing, and now, more than ever, it's time for professionals to lead the way. Join the Oz Professional Paranormal Investigators Association, a global network of serious investigators dedicated to raising the standard of real paranormal research. Access professional certifications, advanced training, and courses exploring true investigation, psychic phenomena. If you're a real paranormal investigator, be a part of the group defining the future. Join today. Visit ozinstitute.org. That's ozinstitute.org. The new book, How to Research a Haunted House by paranormal investigator Margie Kay and professional researcher Violet Wisdom, is now available from Unex Media. This one-of-a-kind book explains how to do research on a house with uncommon methods and resources used by historic home researchers, and how to determine who may be doing the haunting and why. How to Research a Haunted House can be used by homeowners, renters, investors, and it should be in the library of all professional paranormal investigators. Get this unique book at unexmedia.com or amazon.com. That's unexmedia.com or amazon.com.
What if the truth about history, faith, and reality itself wasn't lost to time, but deliberately erased, stripped down, rewritten, and sanitized to keep humanity from seeing what threatens the modern order, and the agendas hiding behind it? In the Shadow of Goliath peels back the veil on a world you were never meant to see, a world where giants walked the earth, angels were not metaphors, and the phenomena we now call UFOs are far older than science dares to admit. Author Will Blesch takes you deep into forbidden territory, where biblical texts, ancient civilizations, archeology, and modern whistleblower testimony collide. From the Nephilim of Genesis to interdimensional beings, from buried giants to classified encounters in the skies, this book asks the questions institutions refuse to answer. Why do every ancient culture's records tell the same story? Why do governments suddenly admit we're not alone? And what happens when suppressed truth finally resurfaces? This isn't speculation added to scripture, and it's not ancient aliens fiction. This is a meticulously researched challenge to the narratives that keep us comfortable and blind. Genesis is allowed to say what it actually says. The Nephilim are not explained away. You begin to discover what happens when suppressed truth finally resurfaces. The shadow of Goliath never disappeared. It stretched forward. You're already standing in it. The only question left is whether you're willing to step into the light of day and decide for yourself what's real. In the Shadow of Goliath, turn the page, step into the deep end, and decide for yourself what's real.
And we're back. You're listening to Unex News. I'm Margie Kay, and my guest this evening is Will Blesch. And we are talking about his new book. And so let's get into it. That was a fantastic trailer.
Well,
I must say, one of the better ones I've seen. Gives me some ideas.
Well, I can't take credit for it. That was done by Skywatch TV. They did some great stuff, and they put that together. So,
yeah, well, they did a good job. Your book explores angels, the Nephilim, and UFOs, UAPs through the lens of history, theology, and mythology. What first drew you to connect these seemingly separate subjects?
Patterns. Basically, there are so many people who they fall on two extremes. either they accept everything with slack-jawed incredulity, and they're like, they believe whatever they see or whatever they hear, or they're on the complete opposite spectrum and they are complete disbelievers, right? They're skeptics over everything.
Right.
And it doesn't matter how much evidence you put in front of them, it's never enough, right? And so I grew up in conservative Judaism, right?
Mhm.
And so when I'm talking to the rabbi about things that are, metaphysical, what's the meaning of life, and this kind of thing, is God real? Are there really angels? Are there XYZ?
Yeah.
What
all
about
the
aliens?
questions.
What about extraterrestrials? What what is a man's place in the universe compared to whatever? And I got a lot of very surface answers back. And the same thing happened when I was talking to a lot of my friends who were Christians. They're youth pastors at the local Baptist church. They got almost the exact same kind of answers that I was getting. And so when we're talking with each other, it's just, very unsatisfying responses to these really deep questions. And so I set out on, this questioning kind of journey. And I started going through spiritual traditions from all over the world. I really got into Wicca. I got into New Age philosophy. I got into Buddhism and Hinduism. I read like a ton of the Hindu scriptures. I read all kinds of mythologies and oral traditions from native peoples around the world, in Africa and in Native Americans, Australian Aborigines. And one of the things that stuck out is that all of these people talk about all of these traditions, all of them. They talk about non-human intelligences. Now, they might disagree about the nature of these non-human intelligences, and they might disagree about their origins, but they all agree, all of them, that there are intelligences that are not human, right? And that kind of interested me. And so over time, I and then I let me back up just a little bit, because I kind of left a little bit out there. As a science fiction buff, I had always also been interested in the question of whether there was actually real extraterrestrial beings from other star systems. And so I was very interested in organizations like MUFON and the UFO community at large. So I was interested, how do I say it? Like, all of these things were interesting to me, but there's all these different points of data, right? And as I'm going through my own personal journey, my own personal spiritual awakening, I got closer and closer to the fact that the only traditions that seemed to deny non-human intelligences outside of something that's just incorporeal spiritual stuff, the only ones that deny these are, mainstream Orthodox Judaism, mainstream Christianity, and it pretty much doesn't matter what denomination you're talking about. And yeah, so these two main, actually Islam as well. So the Abrahamic, the core Abrahamic faiths, to deny this outside of something that's purely spiritual. And that bothered me. I'm like, what, why? What is that a justified position to take? And the more that I researched, the more I found out that these are traditions, and it's not actually what's written in the biblical texts themselves. And it's also not what's written in the surrounding religious literature from the Jewish side of things, like the Second Temple era literature, from the Essenes, from the Zealots, from, you know, and moving onward through time in the Talmud, in the Midrashim, which are like stories that expound on things found within the Hebrew scriptures, right? And then the mystical texts, such as the Zohar, and within Kabbalah, there's just tons of information about non-human intelligences that later traditions explain away. And my perspective, that's there is a very specific reason why they get explained away, but it's like things got scrubbed and sanitized over time, right? And by doing that, it obscures what could be some very real aspects to the reality that we all live in. And so that was the start of me like beginning to connect dots between what UFO and like the UFO community and pop culture talk about when they're talking about extraterrestrials and aliens and this sort of thing, and what many ancient cultures around the world, including the ancient Hebrews, saw as not just spiritual, but actual real beings in a physical sense. So I don't know if I actually answered your question or not. I think I kind of went off on a tangent, but
that's okay. It's all interesting. And you know, there's always been basically two factions, like you said. There are people who are open-minded and they want answers, and then there are people who are so close-minded that they simply cannot look beyond their blinders. They're the skeptics who just dismiss everything because they don't believe it's possible, therefore it isn't.
Right.
And it's difficult to have a conversation with somebody like that, but that's just the way they're wired. You know, I've come to the understanding that you simply cannot change those people no matter how much evidence you put in front of them, because they don't believe it is possible.
That's true.
But there are plenty of people who are very open-minded and want answers, and those are the people who are watching shows like this and writing books like yours. So, you know, there are a couple of things that I wanted to ask you about. Of course, the Nephilim and the biblical giants have been talked about as myth, but do you present any evidence that suggests these beings were actually real and historically significant?
I think so. I think I do. One of the things I should have said when talking about in connecting the dots, right, is that at one point in like pretty much about like 5 years ago, I became I became a follower of Jesus Christ. Okay. And by doing that, like I separated myself from tons of Jews who think I'm now basically a traitor and no longer Jewish because I've, become a Christian. What I would say though, is that when that happened, I became somebody who really, really began to really pay attention to what is written. And so I read the entire Bible from Genesis to the book of Revelation. And when I'm talking about connecting the dots, one of the things that you find is that within the Hebrew scriptures, there are a number of different species of beings that fall under the angel umbrella, right? Angel is it's just a descriptor word. It tells you what the being does. It means it's a messenger of some type. But it doesn't say anything like in terms of taxonomy or ontology. There's nothing that says this is what type of being this is, right? It's just a job. So within that umbrella, there's a number of different types of beings that are described. And one of the things that kind of struck me is the fact that, and I actually heard this from a guy named Timothy Alberino in his book, which is called Birthright. But it really like stuck with me. And that is the fact that these beings can literally be described as alien, like, because they're not human. And they can also be described as extraterrestrial because their place of origin is not planet Earth. And so you have these beings that are described throughout the Hebrew scriptures. And by the way, also very similar beings in the Hindu scriptures, in some regards anyway. And these are like ancient accounts of non-human higher intelligences. And they are technically both alien and extraterrestrial. So that really, was like, all right, now I have kind of a framework that I can begin looking at through a logical lens, through critical thought, and start going point by point, investigating their nature, right? And do they overlap in any way or coincide in any way with descriptions that modern experiencers and abductees experience, in their experiences. And with certain species especially, I think that there is some significant overlap and like connections. So that was one thing that I wanted to
Well, we're up on a break, Will. Just hold that thought for just a couple of minutes. We'll be back right after this.
How do we make the intangible tangible? How do we come to an understanding of a phenomenon when so much information is concocted or misreported and circulated on the internet? How do we find clarity, not only in understanding individual UFO cases, but also the big picture? My name is David Marler. I've been an investigator, researcher, author, and lecturer on the UFO subject for over 35 years. I've always anchored my research in what was meticulously reported and documented regarding UFO incidents. I never succumbed to conspiracy theories. I never relied on second or third-hand reporting. I never let belief lead me. Rather, I've taken a data-driven approach towards the subject, predicated on the original, contemporaneous sources of information. Now, in conjunction with the National UFO Historical Record Center, the largest UFO archive ever assembled in the United States, I am working with a dedicated team who shares this approach and vision. Now, more than ever, we need credible material presented on the UFO subject. As we work through our vast archive, we will bring you the original source materials related to historic UFO cases. Our archive is comprised of thousands of case files derived from some of the earliest UFO investigative and research organizations, APRO, NICAP, CUFOS, and many others. Some of these are familiar cases, but the majority have never been shared or discussed publicly before, until now. Together with my colleagues, who are some of the leading historians in the United States on the UFO subject, we look to be a credible voice for the field. Everything we present is backed up by the original military or civilian UFO reports, the original audio tapes, the original correspondence, the original news clippings, and original photos. All of these are housed at the National UFO Historical Record Center, where they can be accessed by visitors. All of these materials we look to share with you, our audience, in our series, UFOs in Retrospect.
The new book, How to Research a Haunted House by paranormal investigator Margie Kay and professional researcher Violet Wisdom, is now available from Unex Media. This one-of-a-kind book explains how to do research on a house with uncommon methods and resources used by historic home researchers, and how to determine who may be doing the haunting and why. How to Research a Haunted House can be used by homeowners, renters, investors, and it should be in the library of all professional paranormal investigators. Get this unique book at unexmedia.com or amazon.com. That's unexmedia.com or amazon.com. The paranormal field is changing, and now, more than ever, it's time for professionals to lead the way. Join the Oz Professional Paranormal Investigators Association, a global network of serious investigators dedicated to raising the standard of real paranormal research. Access professional certifications, advanced training, and courses exploring true investigation, psychic phenomena. If you're a real paranormal investigator, be a part of the group defining the future. Join today. Visit ozinstitute.org. That's ozinstitute.org.
And we're back with Unex News, and we are speaking with Will Blesch this evening about his book, In the Shadow of Goliath. That's a fantastic cover. That's it. Did you design that?
I had input, but I was not the sole designer, no.
Yeah, well, I've been using AI a lot lately. It's amazing what it can do, too.
I agree.
Yeah.
AI has come a long way in just a very few years. So, I remember, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, you can't trust anything you see anymore because it could be AI.
That's true. That's true. I saw there's, what they call UGC ads, or user generated content ads. And some of those look, completely like real people, and you would not know the difference, unless somebody told you. So,
right. Exactly. Well, let's pick up where we left off. I'm going to let you continue your thought. Sorry about that little glitch earlier. No
worries at all. I honestly don't remember the exact last thing that I had said, except that it was this realization that the non-human beings described in the Hebrew scriptures and within the New Testament, also within the Talmud and later writings, they can all literally, technically be described as alien and extraterrestrial. And once I realized that, it opened up a line of inquiry where I wanted to basically look at things from pure logic, and through critical thought, and go down the rabbit hole in terms of seeing where that led, in terms of how does this compare to what modern experiencers and abductees have related within their testimonies, right? And I found that there is significant overlap and connection between certain species that are described and some of the beings that are described by these experiencers in their testimonies. So that's one of the things that I explore pretty heavily in the book.
That, I have to say we're on the same wavelength there, because I began questioning things in the Bible when I was very young. By the time I was 12 years old, I was kicked out of Bible school in our Methodist church because I asked too many questions. But when you think about it, angels, Nephilim, giants, all of these things that were discussed, and I'm just because of my background, I'm only familiar with the Bible. They all sounded like extraterrestrials. They sounded like beings that came down from the sky or appeared out of nowhere.
Mhm.
So the thought that they're interdimensional beings or extraterrestrial from another place is not surprising. It's not. I think a lot of people have kind of come to that conclusion. But you challenge secular academia and religious institutions for suppressing inconvenient truths. Why do you think these topics have been deliberately suppressed?
Well, when it comes to the churches and synagogues, a lot of it has been suppressed because it changes the dynamic from being something that's kind of spiritual. This is something
Right.
other than
Woo.
this is where God lives. God is out there somewhere, and it's on the on the opposite, on the other side of the veil, kind of thing. And yeah, I actually do believe. This is my personal belief. Okay, I actually do believe that God lives in a dimensional space that is not necessarily right here in our physical plane, right? I think God can be everywhere, but his presence, his place of dwelling, etc., is not planet Earth, at least not right now. Take a look around at the at the conflicts everywhere, and I don't think God is like setting up shop. And the what is it I'm trying to say here? The non-human being interdimensional or extra, like from another star system, etc., is absolutely every single one of those possibilities is still possible when you read the the Hebrew scriptures, and what they actually say, and without putting on layers of interpretation. Now, the churches and the synagogues, they originally did have this supernatural worldview where all of these things are just as real and actually do have interactions with our plane of existence on a regular basis. Over time, that changed, and it changed pretty heavily once we started getting into the Enlightenment period. And during that time, a lot of theologians started thinking, you know what, this is kind of silly. And, because it doesn't match the idea of rational thought. If I can't see it, taste it, touch it in this world, well, it's probably not, if I haven't ever experienced it myself. I never heard God talk, never heard it with my ears, never saw an angel. So these things have to be metaphors. They have to be symbolic. And so that kind of thought began changing the theology that got taught to the masses from the pulpits. And you see it really heavily in beginning with people like Jewish sages like Moses Maimonides or Rambam or the Vilna Gaon. And then on the Christian side, you see it in church fathers like Thomas Aquinas. And all of their writings begin moving the traditional theology that, hey, these beings were actually real. And the Bible meant it when they said XYZ happened. Then these guys moved the whole stream away from what it actually says to what is a completely different interpretation, because it just doesn't make sense from a rational point of view.
So they changed it to a metaphor.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened. And down from the time of these particular guys, those views became the dominant view, which is still the dominant view today. in the book, I actually document the doctrinal statements from literally every single one of the major church denominations in the world today. And every single one of them describe angelic beings as incorporeal and without free will, and only, servants of God designed to minister to people or to, stand around God's throne saying holy, holy, holy all day long. And that's literal doctrinal statement, but that doesn't match what is actually in Scripture. And Scripture describes not just these good guys, it describes bad guys. And that's where the Nephilim come in. It's where these, fallen angels come in. Basically a cosmic rebellious force that invades our dimensional space. And it starts off in Genesis 6, where it talks about the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and they lusted after them, they wanted them, and they came down and they took whomever they wanted as wives. And the connotation in the Hebrew there is not, oh, we love you, you're so beautiful, we want to take you and love you and create families with you. And no, it's we take, and the connotation is rape. It's violent. It's very negative, right? You read the commentaries, and it's almost to a man. These commentaries talk about the violence that is involved in these verses. And so you have these non-human intelligences that show up in Genesis 6, and they father what are called the Nephilim, or the fallen ones. And these are a hybrid species between these non-human intelligences and humans, right? So you have an entire new species that is created or made, and it's because of these beings. Excuse me, my headset's falling off my head. It's because of these beings that God sends the flood. That's one interpretation anyway, of Noah's flood. Most people are like, well, God, the God of the Hebrew scriptures or the Old Testament, he's this genocidal maniac. He's wiping out mankind and all the animals and all of this stuff, and he's just killing everybody because they don't do what he wants them to do. But if you take into account what Genesis 6 is actually implying, which is actually expanded upon in great detail in the book of Enoch, in the book of Jubilees, and in the Essenes, the book of the Giants. There's a lot of supplemental material there. And so you have God looking at these beings, these rebellious beings who have copulated with mankind and created this hybrid species that's kind of unsanctioned, right? And the entire purpose is to change the genetic structure of the human race, to basically breed us out of existence and set up something else to dominate the planet. Whereas God had told Adam, go out, be fruitful, be fruitful and multiply and subdue the earth and rule over it. Well, humanity was designed to rule this planet. This was our domain. And now these rebellious these cosmic rebels show up, and they are trying to basically commit a worldwide interspecies genocide by killing off or breeding out the human species and replacing us with something else. And God, I go into this kind of deep in the book as well, but the connotation, like I said before, was violence, right? It wasn't just, if you go into the broader literature, it wasn't just them breeding or changing the DNA of humans, it was also changing the DNA of the animals, of the plants. They were basically screwing with every living organism and changing what essentially God had created. And when they did that, because they did that, the Hebrew scripture says that everything became corrupt. And when God saw that, it was like, okay, it's time for a reset. I can't allow this to continue, because if I do, everything that I made it's going to be gone.
Mm-hmm.
Humans are going to be gone. So the flood, where he saves Noah and his 3 sons and their wives, along with all these animals on the ark, whether you believe that's an actual real boat with, whatever, or if it's like some, like, what do they call it? Like some kind of a seed kind of ship, where they actually really did save the genetics of all the
Yeah, that's been an
things,
idea
right?
that's been brought up. Mm-hmm.
Whether it doesn't matter what you believe that particular thing really, really was, right? The idea is that God was actually saving the human race and the animals
Mm-hmm.
by removing that genetic corruption from the planet. And so that's, it changes the theology and the actual like idea behind all of that, like completely. Instead of it just being this angry God, boom, you disobeyed me, I'm wiping you out, to something where he's actually saving the human race. I think I kind of went off on a little bit of a tangent there, but like you asked about the Nephilim. Well, that was the parents of the Nephilim, these cosmic, non-human, rebellious entities that show up. Which, by the way, the book of Enoch talks about how many of these beings showed up, and it says that there were 200 myriads. And if you do the math, that actually comes out to over 2 million. So you have these 2 million entities, and if it's some kind of if that's that sounds like an invasion force.
Yeah,
to
it
me.
does sound like an invasion.
And so yeah, it's a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
So anyway, their offspring, these Nephilim, some of them were supposed to be the biblical giants. Goliath was a remnant, right? He was one of the Anakim. He was one of the Anakim. And the Anakim were a tribe.
Let me ask you:
Sure.
Were the giants the Nephilim?
The giants were a tribe of the Nephilim. They were at least one, like a subspecies of Nephilim.
Okay.
The Hebrew Bible only mentions the giants, right, as Nephilim, and it mentions a number of tribes that were found throughout the Levant, but the fact is, the surrounding literature, including the Talmud and the mystical literature later, they talk about all different kinds of Nephilim. So it wasn't just necessarily giants, these big, giant beings. And why is that significant? Because nobody has found these huge giant skeletons anywhere, right? Where's the biblical evidence, or where's the physical evidence for these biblical stories?
Well, there is some evidence.
I agree that there is.
That was removed by the Smithsonian.
Yes.
So
yes, absolutely. But there is, in modern day times, when you say something like that, they're like, that's a conspiracy theory. Where's the evidence that the Smithsonian did X, Y, Z, right?
Right.
And so there's a lot of skepticism out there, and I think it's justifiable in some ways. But there are tons of old newspaper reports of people
Yes.
finding these things. There are reports from people like Abraham Lincoln, who talked about the giants whose bones fill the mounds across North America,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and people who are skeptics will be like, oh, he was just waxing poetic, you know, but he sounded like he was talking about something that was pretty much common knowledge at the time. And there's tons and tons of this kind of evidence, right? But outside of that, because the literature talks about other types of Nephilim, one of the things that I explore in the book is the fact that for the longest time, science said that, for example, the Neanderthals were evolutionary precursors to Homo sapiens sapiens, to modern humans.
Well,
then
on
over
that,
time,
on that note,
yes,
hold that thought.
I'll hold that thought.
We've got to pay the bills around here, so we'll be right back after this.
All right.
Patriarch's oxygen water addresses a condition called hypoxia, which is insufficient oxygen in the cells and tissues. The fact is that hypoxia triggers 90% of all chronic conditions, including circulation issues, low oxygen levels in the blood, and more. By drinking Patriarch's oxygen water, you can restore oxygen levels in the body, restore energy, reduce age spots, and renew stem cells. Now, as an UNX listener, you can get 10% off of Patriarch's ultra-high oxygen content water at patriarchs.us/discount/UNXnews, or check the shop page at UNX Network for more information.
The paranormal field is changing, and now, more than ever, it's time for professionals to lead the way. Join the Oz Professional Paranormal Investigators Association, a global network of serious investigators dedicated to raising the standard of real paranormal research. Access professional certifications, advanced training, and courses exploring true investigation, psychic phenomena. If you're a real paranormal investigator, be a part of the group defining the future. Join today. Visit ozinstitute.org. That's ozinstitute.org. The new book, How to Research a Haunted House by paranormal investigator Margie Kay and professional researcher Violet Wisdom, is now available from UNX Media. This one-of-a-kind book explains how to do research on a house with uncommon methods and resources used by historic home researchers, and how to determine who may be doing the haunting and why. How to Research a Haunted House can be used by homeowners, renters, investors, and it should be in the library of all professional paranormal investigators. Get this unique book at unxmedia.com or amazon.com. That's unxmedia.com or amazon.com.
And we're back. You're listening to UNX News. I'm your host, Margie Kay. My guest this evening is Will Blesch, and we are talking about his new book, In the Shadow of Goliath. Will, before the break, you were talking about the Nephilim and the giants. Please continue.
Sure. So I was saying how within modern science, when it comes to the evolutionary theory, or the theory of evolution, for the longest time, the Neanderthals, for example, were talked about as if they were precursors, you know, like evolutionary ancestors to
Right.
Homo sapiens sapiens, or modern humans. And then over time, as more evidence was gathered, we suddenly found out, oh, wait a second. At some point during history, Homo sapiens, Neanderthalis, and Homo sapiens sapiens coexisted side by side for a significant period of time. And the same thing when it came to Denisovians. Well, some people there's been various theories that have been put out by Christian organizations, like creationist organizations, such as the idea that, okay, well, Neanderthals, we're not going to say that we believe in the theory of evolution. So what we will say is maybe these beings were a pre-Adamic race. And then it falls into this, which is too big to go into on this program. But there's like there's a very big theory concerning what life and the earth was like before Adam. Because of there's something called the gap theory. And I touch on that a little bit in my book as well. Another theory that has been put forth is the idea that, okay, there were these beings who looked very similar in some ways to modern humans, but they weren't humans. They certainly didn't carry the image of God. So they were basically a type of very intelligent animal that, and who could make tools and glue and make rock paintings and this kind of thing, right? But they're certainly not related to humans, except the scientific evidence, shows that Northern Europeans carry 2% of Neanderthal DNA in their it's mitochondrial DNA. And when it comes to Denisovians, there are certain Asian populations that carry up to 4% of Denisovian DNA, I believe, in their mitochondrial DNA. Now, one of the things that I don't think anybody has thought about is the idea that, wait a second, the theory of evolution was already like their idea was proven wrong by science, that these were not precursors to us. We didn't evolve from them because we coexisted at the same time as them for a certain number of years, right? But then on the flip side, you have these religious people who are doing like their own theories that don't really have very much merit. I mean, if you're going to argue that humans have or carry the image of God, and at the very same time argue that these other beings, the Neanderthals, for example, were just really intelligent animals, but then you find out that these really intelligent animals bred with the humans and there were offspring and there's DNA left within the human population up to 2%. That doesn't make very much sense. And also, while there have been cases of humans having sex with animals throughout human history, at no time did these copulations produce viable offspring, right? For there to be a child from a union, there has to be compatible DNA. And so there's two things from that, just from that. Number one, these non-human intelligences that had sex with human women had to have some kind of DNA. That means they can't be incorporeal beings, at least not entirely, right? They have to have some way of making themselves physical. I don't know if you know who Jacques Vallée is.
Oh, I know Jacques.
Oh, you know him. Okay, so he has a quote where he says something to the effect of, "How does the devil, how does the devil have intercourse?" And that's an excellent question. You have these cosmic rebels coming onto our planet, taking human women by force and, breeding with them. How does that happen if you are just some wispy spirit? does not compute, right? And then when you get to the idea of the children, them having relations, cultural, as well as war, as well as sexual relations, all of those things happened between the Nephilim and humans in the Hebrew scriptures. And science has shown now that it also happened between Neanderthals, Denisovians, and modern humans.
Mm-hmm.
And I document a bunch of that in the book with peer-reviewed literature. The other thing that I think is really, really interesting that shows the idea that these are not necessarily evolutionary, like beings who evolved from some, like along the same family tree as modern humans, and at some point we diverged, and also they're evolutionary cousins. There's actually a lot more evidence for the idea that hybrid populations start off small, and when they have very low genetic diversity, especially at the beginning. And that's something that is seen in the literature, in the scientific literature concerning Neanderthals. Their genetic diversity was extremely low. And it's one of the reasons that some speculate that that's, that they died off because of that very low genetic diversity.
Mm-hmm.
But what if they started off with very low genetic diversity because they were a hybrid species to begin with? There's a lot of, I think it's a very interesting question that not many people have explored. And I think that they should. I don't know that, I'm sure that there are people who are going to look at me and be like, that dude is out of his mind, but I've never, and I'm sure I'm going to get it from, mainline Christians as well as mainline,
oh yeah,
guys in the evolutionary theories camp.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that there are questions. I don't think there's anything wrong with questions, number one. And I think that if you have a question, either prove it wrong and do get some more evidence and show me that I am completely wrong, and I will be willing to take a look at it. Right. But do some more research, because there are some valid questions to these things. And
Yeah.
I talk about that in the book as well.
We've got a question from the chat real quick.
Sure.
What is the possibility that there was a previous advanced race here on Earth before humanity, and what happened to it? And do the Sky Wars have anything to do with it?
Well, I'm not sure what the commenter is talking about in terms of Sky Wars.
I believe that he's talking about during the Middle Ages, there were a lot of objects in the sky, and they seemed to be fighting each other. They were shooting some type of missiles or something, and that was documented. And also a lot of drawings were made at that time.
Okay. First of all, when it comes to an advanced race here on Earth before humanity, that seems a lot like a pre-Adamic race theory kind of thing. If you're familiar, there's actually two different gap theories. One, it was put forth by somebody who was actually like pretty racist back in the 1800s. And the other one is more, mainline, and it just posits the idea that in the book of Genesis, at the very beginning, between verses 1 and 2, there is a gap in time. And so when God is creating the world, he's actually recreating the world, or restoring it to something that had been destroyed previously. Because it says that there was darkness was on the face of the deep, and there was like darkness and void. I was like, man, I can't remember the exact verses. I should have my Bible open right in front of me, but I don't. But there's this gap right between the first verse and the second verse, and during in the second verse, it talks about there being a void and there being a like a destruction kind of thing. That's what the Hebrew words connotate, is that it wasn't just nothingness, and out of nothingness God creates the world. It's out of a wasteland God creates this new creation, right? And so there has to have been something that came before. What was the creation that was before all of that? If the earth has actually really been here for millions of years, as most scientists believe, then there's the idea that there could have been other civilizations, other, beings, etc. That becomes a lot more believable. Interestingly, within Jewish thought, there is the idea that there have been cycles of creation and that we are just the latest. We're the new kids on the block. And so, but I don't know that I'm actually answering your question as well as you would like me to.
No, I think so. Yeah, I think that's definitely to the point. I've got one more question here that I'm going to show. What are your thoughts about the Tower of Babel and dispersal of various human clans between different members of Elohim?
Okay, so I think that's referring to aspects of the divine council that you see within the Hebrew scriptures. God is God. He's the one who's the ultimate creator, the ultimate decision maker, but there are other beings that he has created to work with him and who act in a governing capacity throughout God's kingdom, which is all of creation, right? There's different, just like the United States has different states and different cities, but it's all part of one kingdom. So God has whatever interdimensional space that he's in, and that, the ethereal plane, or and then the material plane and the universe that we all know and love. So these beings that he created as governors, he assigned at some point to be like regional governors over the earth. And he gave various ethnicities and nations to the care of these beings. And when the Tower of Babel happened, basically what these people were doing was trying to recreate the rebellious dynamic that was going on before the flood with these fallen rebellious entities who were in power. Okay. And these governors, one of the things you have to understand something about Middle Eastern theology, and this is with Mesopotamians, it's with the Hebrews. The Hebrews kind of take a lot of the theology of the surrounding areas, the surrounding peoples, and they kind of flip it on its head. They're all like, these beings are all good guys. They came to give us knowledge and blah, blah, blah. And, all these great, good little gifts. And the Hebrews were like, no, these are not gods. These are fallen angelic or, non-human entity beings. And their gifts, they might seem good for a little while, but they are actually, meant for destruction, to wipe us out. They get us to wipe each other out. They taught us how to make war, that kind of thing. And so at the Tower of Babel, mankind had already been given over to, I think it was 70 different entities who were this divine council, and the majority of them fell. They succumbed to the idea of, hey, I really like the idea of being worshipped. And so they did set themselves up as gods over the various nations and peoples and ethnicities, right? And that's, and God, with the whole Tower of Babel thing, God was like, that's not gonna, you're not gonna, go back to what you were doing before the flood. So no, we're gonna confuse your language, or they'll confuse the languages, and then you go out. Whether or not all the different, I can't remember how many languages are on the earth today, but there's, I think it's 4,000 something different languages. But the point, to answer your question, is that out of all of those that I know of for sure, the only prince that didn't fall was Michael, who was the prince over Israel. And you find that in the book of Daniel. The prince of, I think, the prince of Persia, the prince of Greece. You find this idea of there being these angelic princes who are in power over different geographic regions. And these are the non-human entities, these governors who have power, right? And the only one that is mentioned as being a good guy out of all of these is Michael. Whether or not there were others who maybe also did not fall, don't know, because the text doesn't say. But there is the idea that many of the nations were governed by certain non-human entities who did set themselves up as gods, and people worshiped them. So,
well, that leads me to thinking about Zechariah Sitchin and Eric von Daniken. How does your approach differ from their theories?
Well, that's the ancient aliens theory. You see it on the History Channel all the time. And that actually is their idea, okay, is that there are ancient non-human entities who are extraterrestrials in terms of coming from another star system. They exist inside our dimensional space, and they originated on a planet somewhere in our galaxy or another galaxy, but it's all within this same universe, right? Or same physical universe. What I'm saying is that I'm not saying, like, my book does not argue that UFOs and UAPs are all demons or anything like that you hear in some Christian circles. I don't argue that. I do think that there is the possibility of life that has arisen around some distant star. There are so many bajillions of star systems out there that it doesn't, like, to me personally, it doesn't make sense that God would just create humanity on Earth and that's it in this entire universe, right?
Right.
And that just does not make sense to me whatsoever. And that's especially the truth, especially the case when you see verses in the Bible that say the heavens declare the glory of God, right? And in Jewish thought, there's stuff that says God moves through 18,000 different worlds. And because he does so, that it assumes that there are intelligent beings in these 18,000 different worlds. Because why is he moving through 18,000 different worlds, and how, there's a lot of interesting questions surrounding that. Not just that, but there's a certain interpretation, which I also talk about in my book, of a particular star somewhere in our galaxy, or in some star system somewhere, called Miraz. And the people of this who lived around this star or planet, they were cursed. And they were cursed because they didn't come to the aid of the Lord in battle during some cosmic conflict. Doesn't say when, doesn't say where, but there are these scattered references to this. And people just totally ignore this kind of stuff. They're like, oh, that's kind of weird. Let's skip past that. But
I've never heard of that.
Well, it's the first reference you find is in the Song of Deborah. And it's after she was in a fight against the Syrian general Sisera. And in her song, she said, one of the lines is, "From the stars they fought. Along their courses, they did this and this and this and this and this. Who is they?" And then she talks about the mighty ones. The mighty ones from the stars fought, doing blah, 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 blah. And then you go into the prophets, and they also make references. And they refer back to the Song of Deborah when they're talking about this. And so there's this idea in rabbinic thought, okay, that there were these beings at some point in cosmic history where there was some kind of battle that was being fought, and they were cursed because they chose neutrality instead of coming to the aid of the Lord in battle against the mighty ones. Now, and I talk about that to a certain degree in the book as well, because I think it's really interesting. And I think it kind of flies in the face of the idea, again, that we are the only intelligent life in this physical plane of existence.
Right.
So I don't know if I think I kind of got off track there a little bit again.
That's quite all right. It's easy to do.
What were we talking about before I mentioned Miraz? And
Well, I'll tell you what, I've got another question because we're going to run out of time here in just a few minutes. You talk about, in your book subtitle mentions interdimensional war. So how do you define this war, and does it mean something for humanity today?
Yes, and actually that allows me to go back to what I was talking about in terms of extraterrestrials, and the idea of them originating around some distant star. While I do think that that's a possibility, I also think that when it comes to biblical species that are described, non-human entities that are described, they fit an interdimensional paradigm a lot better than the ancient aliens theory from Sitchin or von Daniken. And they let me see how I should say that. First of all, they fit the interdimensional paradigm much better. But something that one of the things, let me go back to this because it's a big part of the book, several chapters. One of the things that you find in a lot of New Age circles and within, like, Dr. Stephen Greer and his CE5 experiences, his program for experiencing and contacting extraterrestrials telepathically, etc. And you see this in channelers. You see it with mediums. A lot of times they will be talking about how they have contacted extraterrestrial beings, and they'll say that they come from these beings. When they're channeling, etc., they'll talk about how they come from a certain star system, like the Pleiades. Well, the Nordics come from the Pleiades. And if you go to, for example, Gaia.com, and you look up their entry on the Nordics, do they come from the Pleiades? Yes. Okay. And they're interdimensional. So you have this very interesting, it's not a dichotomy. It's not like a this or that, but they're apparently both in New Age thought. Well, these Nordic beings, they fit the description of what the Bible calls Ishim, or man-like angels. And when, for example, Gabriel, right? Gabriel's described as an archangel, but in the book of Daniel, it never calls him an angel, not even once. It doesn't describe him with wings, not even once. He is, it calls him the man Gabriel. And he's not the only one in the book of Genesis. There's a point where two angels and the Lord come to visit Abraham by the oak of Mamre. And they talk with him. They look like men. They sit and they eat food that Abraham and his wife Sarah give to them. Two of those guys, they later go to Sodom and Gomorrah to bring Lot out to rescue him from what God is planning to do to destroy the city. And they are clearly, these two guys actually are clearly described as angels, but they look like really beautiful men. The same thing happens with Nordics. The ones in many, many, testimonies and encounters, these guys look like the best Fabio or Arnold Schwarzenegger that, any woman could dream of, right? And they're the guys on the cover of romance novels. And they match the very same kinds of descriptions that you find in the Hebrew scriptures concerning that specific species, which is like I said, the Ishim, or the man-like angels. And there's a lot more that you could talk about there, but there's this overlap. And so from my perspective, it's not, I don't think that these gods that the nations have had, I don't think that they were intergalactic visitors coming to Earth. I do think that they were interdimensional entities who, some of them may have been benevolent and were loyal to God, like the scripture says, like Gabriel, for example. But there was a whole lot who fell and who accepted the worship of mankind and who didn't really have our best interests at heart. So that's my particular take on it. And I go into really deep arguments about why. So,
well, we've got 3 minutes left. So, in that time, how has the book been published?
Yes, it came out on March 26th.
Okay, and where can people get a hold of that?
They can go to Amazon.com. You can go to Barnes and Noble. It's at Books A Million, bookshop.org. I believe you can order it from Walmart, from Target. It's pretty much anywhere that books are sold. And if it's not there in a physical copy, you can get them to order it.
Okay, so it's in print, and is it also going to be available as an ebook?
Yeah, it is available in print. It's also available as like on Amazon KDP. I believe it's a digital book on Amazon as well.
Okay, wonderful, because I know a lot of people like that format as well. Well, this has been extremely interesting. I appreciate a different perspective on things, and you certainly do have a different perspective, and evidently you've done a ton of research on this. How long did it take you to write the book?
It took me about a year to write it, and I was doing a lot of research before that, gathering all of the notes together. That's something that I actually am really proud of. The book has been endorsed by a lot of different, very well-known people.
Yes.
For example, Mitch Horowitz, who is the host of Discovery and HBO Max's Alien Encounters, Fact or Fiction. And one of the things that he said is that people are going to, the academics are going to hate this book because I treat people with respect, and I don't talk down to people, but I do, and I provide all of the research that made me come to the conclusions that I came to. You might not agree with me at all, but that's not the point. The point is to get people thinking and thinking critically. So,
well, that's fantastic. The book is In the Shadow of Goliath, Angels, Giants, UFOs, and the Hidden History of the Watchers, Nephilim, and Interdimensional War. I can't wait to read it. Will Blesch, thank you so much for being my guest on the show tonight, and I hope you'll come back again sometime.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, that wraps up another show for us here. And next week, brand new show, brand new format. So stay tuned. See you next time.